Today we're going to do inverse on matrices, and we talked about this the other day about why we need to do inverses, but basically in matrices we have addition, multiplication, but there's no division. So what we're going to learn today are how to find inverses of a matrix, and there's a process, but at this point in your career, I just want you to know how to find it, and you may find it on your calculator. So if you will hit pause, put number 1 into a matrix A, and then I'll go through the steps on your calculator how to do that. So remember, when you want to put something in a calculator in a matrix, you hit the second and the matrix button. We want to put in a 2 by 2. So we put a 2 by 2 in for the dimensions. We put our entries in. And when we want to get out of this, we'll hit second quit. Now we don't want to find A, we want to find A inverse. So the inverse key is x to the negative 1 key. And when you find the inverse, it will look a little bad as far as decimals go. But remember, we want to change this to a fraction, so you will hit math and then the fraction button and record what A inverse is, and then I'll kind of go over what you actually found there. So A inverse will be a 1/13, a negative 2/13, negative 9/65. And again, where do these numbers come from? I'll show you in a second. So basically, what I want you to see is A inverse is the equivalent of division. So in regular math, when we have an equation like 5x equal to 15, we would divide by 5, divide by 5. Okay? But in matrix multiplication, we don't, or matrix division, we don't have that. So if you will type in A times A inverse on your calculator, this is kind of the undo button for matrices. So simply type in A. I'll clear my calculator so you can see. So type in A times A inverse, and you'll see we don't end up with 1, but what we end up with is what we call the identity matrix. And that identity matrix are 1s in the main diagonal and 0s everywhere else. Okay. So again, kind of hit pause on your calculator. We'll do number 2 in our calculator and record the answer. I apologize of how the screen kind of seems like it's going in and out, but I think it's the sunshine that we're having. So click pause, put number 2 into your calculator, press play again, and see if you get the correct answer for 2's inverse. So after you've put in this 3 by 3 into matrix A, I'm going to find the inverse of A. And again, the numbers are usually a little weird for the inverse. And if you have decimals, I don't want you to record the decimals. I want you to change it to a fraction and record those fractions. Okay, so you can see we should have a 3 by 3, but you don't really see a 3 by 3 until you hit the over key so you can get the other 2 rows. So how do you get the other 2 rows? Just keep on hitting the over button, record. We can check this because when we multiply an inverse by itself, we should get what's called the identity matrix. And that identity matrix this time will be all 1s in the main diagonal, and everything else will be equal to 0s. Okay, so the identity matrix is what we get when we multiply A times A inverse. We always get what's called the identity matrix. And if it's a 2 by 2, it'll look like a 1 and a 0 here. If it's a 3 by 3, we'll have 3 1s and the rest will all be 0s. So basically, where do we use this? If you take a look at the equations in number 3 and 4, This is where we will solve for equations. And so normally I would think that you might see this in a algebraic equation as this is something times x equals something else. In algebra, we would just divide by 5, divide by 5. But in matrix, we don't have division, so what we will do is we will put a here and an x equals some b, and then I want to solve for x. So what I want to do is I want to undo this a, so instead of dividing by a, we're going to do what's called a inverse on both sides. Now what does that accomplish? That accomplishes a inverse times a is the identity matrix, which is a 1. And when you want to find a matrix using the inverse key, we will just actually put in this matrix in A, this matrix in B, and then we will, on our calculator, type in A inverse B, and that will give us what X is. So that was a mouthful. So again, let's put some things into the calculator. What am I going to do? I'm going to put this in matrix A, this in matrix B, hit stop, and take a minute. So what you should have done is you should have put matrix A in A. I would like you to put matrix B as this matrix. And then in order to solve for X, all we need to do is say A inverse times B matrix, and that will give us the answer for our X matrix. So negative 11, negative 7, negative 7, negative 9. Okay. This will be the matrix that if I multiplied it by this matrix, I would get a negative 15, negative 5, negative 28, 14. Okay. Example 4 is very similar, except for we have a matrix times B equals another matrix. So again, what you will do is you put this in matrix A. Let's put this in matrix C since I have a B matrix. I want to solve for B, so I want to get rid of matrix A. So I'm going to A inverse both sides. So this time I'll put this in matrix A, this in matrix C. Matrix B, when we punch it, will just be A inverse C. Again, hit stop, put those values in, and check your right answers. So what you should have done is you should have put this in matrix A, this in matrix C. If you punch out B equals A inverse C, then B's matrix would equal a negative 5, negative 2, and that's your answer. In other words, if I would multiply 4, 5, and a 0, 1 times this matrix, I should get a negative 30, negative 2. Okay, so a quick refresher of how to multiply. Remember, we take a row by the column. So there's negative 20 plus a negative 10. Oh, sure enough, that's a negative 30. 0 plus a negative 2 is a negative 2. We can kind of check to make sure that works. The last example is a two-step equation. So let me give you an algebraic equation that would be 2 steps. So if I had this algebraic equation, the 2 steps to solve this would be I would subtract off 1, divide by 5, divide by 5. So I'm going to do that same thing, but remember that I'm not going to be able to divide by a matrix because I don't have division in matrices. So let's see, first steps first. So I want to move this to this other side. So in order to solve for x, I'm going to have a 2-step process. So to get this all by itself, I must move this to the right-hand side, which means that I'm going to subtract that matrice from both sides. Remember our rules for subtracting matrices? We must have same dimensions, we do, and we just subtract off the corresponding pieces. So negative 19 minus 1 would be a negative 20. 18 minus 5 would be a 13. Now, this should look like...
What
option number. Now this looks like options 3 and 4, so I want to solve for x. So I'll put this into A matrix, I'll put this into B matrix. How do I solve for x? I'll always go A inverse B, and then that will solve my x matricing. So again, stop, put that into your calculator. The last step to solve for x is to type in A inverse B. When I type that in my calculator, use your inverse key times B, and our answer is a 1, -3. Okay. I'd like you to go to the pink sheet now and do just the front of the pink worksheet, and we'll do the back together in a little bit.